The passage of time in the entertainment industry has a peculiar way of shifting our collective perspective on the films and the faces that defined our youth, making us look back on classical eras with a sense of profound nostalgia. For decades, the magic of the silver screen relied on a certain mystique, an unspoken and carefully maintained distance between the larger-than-life figures on the screen and the audiences who admired them from the quiet darkness of a movie theater. When an iconic figure passes away, it does not merely signal the end of a remarkable career, it feels like the closing of a chapter in our own personal histories. A sudden and sobering reminder that the golden eras of cinema are gradually slipping into the history books. We find ourselves looking back at the monumental projects that brought these extraordinary artists together, marveling at the chemistry, the dedication, and the sheer cultural impact of stories that managed to transcend their specific eras. In these moments of collective reflection, the world naturally turns to those who shared the frame with these departed legends, searching for personal anecdotes, shared secrets from the set, and genuine expressions of grief that might offer some comfort or a deeper insight into the human beings behind the famous roles. However, the way we grieve and honor these figures has undergone a profound transformation in the modern era, dictated by the rapid, unfiltered, and highly visible nature of digital communication. Where once a thoughtful written statement, released through a representative or a quiet private letter of condolence would suffice, today's public expects immediate, highly accessible, and deeply personal reactions broadcasted directly to social media. This shift has turned the act of mourning into a complex public performance, where every word, pause, and gesture is dissected by millions of onlookers seeking authenticity in a digital landscape often criticized for its superficiality. It is a delicate tightrope to walk, balancing genuine personal reminiscence with the solemnity required to keep the focus entirely on the deceased and their lasting legacy. As we delve deeper into how these modern dynamics shape our overall perception of Hollywood's legacy and the controversies that can arise from even the most well-intentioned gestures, we invite you to join our growing community of film enthusiasts by subscribing to our channel, ensuring you never miss our in-depth explorations of cinematic history and the real stories behind the headlines. To truly understand the gravity of these public tributes and the reactions they provoke, we must transport ourselves back to a pivotal moment in cinema history, specifically the transition between the late 1980s and the early 1990s. It was an era when the Cold War thriller was reaching its creative and commercial zenith, and one particular high-profile project was being assembled that would bring together an extraordinary ensemble of veteran legendary actors and promising rising stars. The production of this film, set within the claustrophobic, tense, and high-stakes environment of a nuclear submarine, required a level of intensity and mutual trust among the cast that is rarely demanded in standard Hollywood productions. For a young actor stepping onto a massive set populated by established giants of the industry, the experience was undoubtedly both exhilarating and terrifying, representing a critical turning point that could permanently define the trajectory of a career. The bonds formed in those cramped, dimly lit sets under the meticulous direction of visionary filmmakers were forged in a unique crucible of creative pressure, creating vivid memories that would linger for decades. The fragile nature of these enduring connections and the shared history of Hollywood was brought to the forefront of global attention recently when devastating news emerged from Australia, sending shockwaves through the international film community and generations of moviegoers. The announcement of the passing of a beloved screen icon, a man whose career spanned decades and included some of the most memorable and culturally significant roles in modern cinematic history, was met with a profound and immediate sense of loss. Having recently shared optimistic updates about his health, the suddenness of his departure added an extra layer of sorrow to an already grieving public, who remembered him not just for his formidable talent and commanding on-screen presence, but for the quiet dignity, warmth, and humility he brought to every role and press interview throughout his long life. From his early days in independent cinema to his defining roles in massive global blockbusters that shaped modern pop culture, he had established himself as a versatile, dependable, and deeply respected artist whose contributions to the craft of acting would endure long after his passing, as tributes began to pour in from fans, critics, and colleagues across the globe. One particular response from a prominent former co-star immediately caught the attention of the public, though perhaps not for the reasons the creator had originally intended. A nearly 3-minute video shared on a major social media platform designed to be a heartfelt homage to a fallen colleague quickly became the center of a swirling controversy, igniting a heated debate about the nature of modern tributes and the thin line between honoring a friend and reflecting on one's own past achievements. What was meant to be a moment of solemn remembrance was suddenly transformed into a lightning rod for public criticism, as viewers began to analyze the structure, focus, and ultimate message of the video. This unexpected turn of events highlighted the complicated, often unpredictable nature of public communication in the digital age, setting the stage for a deeper, more analytical look into a tribute that left many questioning the true intentions behind the words spoken in the wake of a great tragedy, leaving the online community fiercely divided over the boundary between memory and self-reflection. The unexpected wave of criticism that washed over Alec Baldwin following his digital tribute to the late Sam Neill serves as a fascinating case study in how public perception is managed and often mismanaged in the modern age. When the news broke that Sam Neill, the legendary star of blockbuster epics and intimate dramas alike, had passed away at the age of 78, the collective sigh of grief from the global film community was palpable. Having recently battled a challenging diagnosis of blood cancer, Neill had only shortly before his passing shared the heartening news that he was officially cancer-free. This made the sudden announcement of his death by his family in Sydney, Australia, all the more shocking and deeply painful for those who had followed his journey with hope. As the world sought comfort in shared memories, Baldwin, now 68, took to his Instagram account on a quiet Monday to post a nearly 3-minute video addressing the loss. However, what ensued was a masterclass in how a well-meaning gesture can be perceived as an exercise in self-absorption, triggering an immediate and intense backlash from observers who felt the tribute was far more concerned with Baldwin's own glory days than the life of the man who had actually passed away. To understand why the internet reacted with such swift and uncompromising hostility, one must dissect the actual structure and timing of Baldwin's video message. He began the clip with a solemn look, stating how deeply stricken he was to learn of the death of Sam Neill, a sentiment that seemed entirely appropriate and genuinely felt. But within the first 10 seconds, the narrative trajectory of the video took a sharp and permanent detour. Baldwin immediately transitioned from expressing grief to reminiscing about his own early career, specifically pointing out that when he filmed the highly acclaimed thriller The Hunt for Red October, it was shot in 1989 and released in 1990. From that moment on, the late Sam Neill was effectively sidelined in his own tribute, as Baldwin embarked on a detailed, nostalgic journey through his own experiences on the set of the iconic Cold War film. For the vast majority of the 3-minute recording, the audience was treated to Baldwin's vivid recollections of working on what was one of his first major starring roles in a Hollywood blockbuster, leaving many to wonder if the actor had lost sight of why he had turned on his camera in the first place. As Baldwin warmed to his subject, the video transformed into a sprawling trip down memory lane, rich with behind-the-scenes details and the enthusiastic name-dropping of Hollywood royalty. He spoke passionately about the brilliant direction of John McTiernan, who masterfully built the claustrophobic tension of the submarine thriller, and recalled his personal interactions with the legendary author Tom Clancy, whose bestseller served as the foundation for the entire project. Baldwin, who portrayed the central character of Jack Ryan, then proceeded to systematically list and praise a staggering 14 of his former castmates. He rattled off the names of cinematic giants such as Sean Connery, Tim Curry, and James Earl Jones, sharing specific colorful anecdotes from the production. In one particularly detailed segment, Baldwin fondly recalled a moment involving actor Ronald Gutman smoking a cigarette and affecting a thick Russian accent, which then led Baldwin to perform a vocal impression of the deep, booming voice of James Earl Jones. While these stories were undoubtedly entertaining and historically interesting to cinema buffs, they had virtually nothing to do with Sam Neill, who played Captain Vasily Borodin in the very same film. The sheer disproportion of the tribute's focus became the primary target of public outrage, as viewers noted that Neill was only mentioned in the first 10 seconds and the final 5 seconds of the entire clip. It was only as the video was drawing to a close that Baldwin seemed to suddenly remember the solemn purpose of his broadcast, returning his focus to the late actor in the final 15 seconds. Baldwin remarked that The Hunt for Red October was one of the few movies he had ever made where he could actually remember the entire production, explaining that he was a massive fan of the work of his co-stars. though not a fan of his own performance. He concluded the video with a series of emotional exclamations saying, "Anyway, oh my God, Sam Neill. My love to his family, my love to his family." To many critics, this abrupt return to the subject felt like an afterthought. A hasty attempt to bookend a lengthy monologue about his own career with a brief nod to a deceased colleague. The reaction on social media platforms, particularly on X, formerly known as Twitter, was swift, harsh, and remarkably unified in its condemnation of Baldwin's approach. Social media users accused the veteran actor of demonstrating classic narcissistic behavior, arguing that he had managed to make a tragic death entirely about himself. One particularly scathing comment, which was widely shared and echoed by many, read that it was classic Baldwin to make everything about himself, even when the goal was supposed to be honoring a legendary co-star. Others expressed genuine confusion over how Baldwin could have wandered so far off topic, with one user asking if he had simply forgotten what he was supposed to be talking about, noting that he had virtually zero to say about Sam himself. Another commentator dryly observed that Baldwin only seemed to remember the actual purpose of the video in the final 15 seconds, highlighting the bizarre pacing and structure of the tribute. Yet, despite the overwhelming tide of negative feedback, the digital space is rarely entirely one-sided, and a segment of Baldwin's followers stepped forward to defend his intentions and the nature of his post. On Instagram, several fans left supportive comments, praising his calm, compassionate, and kind manner of speaking when discussing his former colleagues. One defender argued that while the video did not say much about Sam Neill specifically, it provided a wonderful introspective look at the making of a classic film, which inspired them to want to watch the cinematic masterpiece again. Another supporter agreed, noting that while the focus was largely on the production of the film, it served as a warm reminder of a golden era of filmmaking and that Sam Neill was indeed magnificent, confessing to having had a crush on the late actor for decades. These defenders saw Baldwin's rambling thoughts not as self-centeredness, but as a genuine, unfiltered window into the shared history of two actors who participated in a monumental piece of culture, suggesting that remembering the film was Baldwin's personal way of honoring Neill's place within his own life story. To understand the deep resonance of this controversy, we must look beyond the immediate social media backlash and examine the extraordinary life of the man who was lost, and the monumental film that bound these two actors together in the public imagination. Sam Neill's journey through the world of cinema was characterized by an uncommon grace, a quiet intelligence, and a remarkable versatility that allowed him to move seamlessly between major Hollywood blockbusters and intimate, character-driven independent films. Born in Northern Ireland and raised in New Zealand, Neill possessed a distinct international appeal, combining a rugged, understated masculinity with a refined intellectual sensibility. While global audiences perhaps know him best as the heroic paleontologist Dr. Alan Grant in the legendary Jurassic Park franchise, his filmography is a rich tapestry of complex, challenging roles. From his haunting performance in the psychological horror film Possession to his brilliant portrayal of a stern 19th-century Scotsman in the critically acclaimed drama The Piano, Neill consistently demonstrated a profound commitment to his craft. He was an actor who never sought the cheap spotlight of celebrity, preferring instead to let his diverse body of work speak for itself, earning him the deep respect of his peers and the lasting affection of moviegoers worldwide. The film that served as the catalyst for Alec Baldwin's controversial walk down memory lane, The Hunt for Red October, remains one of the high-water marks of modern cinematic suspense, a masterpiece of tension that continues to captivate audiences decades after its initial release. Set against the frigid, high-stakes backdrop of the twilight years of the Cold War, the film told the gripping story of a rogue Soviet submarine captain seeking to defect to the United States with a highly advanced, undetectable nuclear vessel. The production was a monumental undertaking, requiring the creation of massive, highly realistic submarine interiors that effectively conveyed the claustrophobic, pressure cooker environment of underwater warfare. Within this tense, hyper-masculine world, Sam Neill delivered a masterclass in understated acting as Captain Vasily Borodin, the loyal, quiet first officer who shared a dream of a simple, peaceful life in America, famously wishing to grow round fat tomatoes in Montana. It was a role that required a delicate balance of quiet loyalty, deep weariness, and a subtle, tragic hopefulness, providing a perfect, grounding counterweight to the larger-than-life performances of his co-stars. The tragic reality of Neill's passing on a quiet Monday in Sydney, Australia at the age of 78 brought a sudden, Somber close to a life lived with immense dignity and purpose. His family's touching public statement revealed that he passed away surrounded by his loved ones, maintaining the quiet strength that had defined his entire existence. Crucially, the family sought to bring comfort to his millions of admirers by confirming that despite the suddenness of his departure, Neill had remained entirely cancer-free following his intense, highly publicized battle with a rare form of blood cancer. This detail added a poignant layer of bittersweet relief to the tragedy, emphasizing that Neill had faced his final years with the same courage, humor, and resilience that he brought to his cinematic roles. The loss of such a grounded, widely beloved figure naturally created a profound void, making the public particularly sensitive to the manner in which his peers chose to honor his memory, and setting the stage for the intense scrutiny that would be applied to Alec Baldwin's well-intentioned but highly eccentric video tribute. In the grander scheme of Hollywood history, the conflict over Baldwin's video reflects a much larger, ongoing cultural debate about the nature of memory, legacy, and the intense pressures of the digital spotlight. For veteran actors who came of age in an era before the relentless 24-hour news cycle and the instant feedback loop of social media, navigating these public platforms can be an incredibly treacherous endeavor. Baldwin's decision to share a raw, unedited, and highly conversational video was likely an attempt to offer something more authentic than a sterile, publicist-approved written statement, but it ran directly into the highly critical, highly analytical gaze of a modern internet audience that demands absolute focus on the deceased during moments of national mourning. This clash of communication styles highlights the growing generational divide in how we process grief publicly, where a spontaneous stream of consciousness, recollection of a shared creative milestone can easily be misconstrued as self-centeredness and a lack of respect for a departed friend. Ultimately, the controversy surrounding the Instagram tribute will likely fade into the background, a minor footnote in the long, complex public lives of both Alec Baldwin and the late, great Sam Neill. What will endure far beyond the fleeting outrage of social media comment sections is the magnificent, timeless work these two artists left behind on the silver screen. When future generations of film lovers sit down to watch the silent, tense, and beautifully crafted maneuvers of the fictional Soviet submarine navigating the deep, dark trenches of the Atlantic Ocean, they will not remember the brief online controversies or the awkward digital tributes of the past. Instead, they will be spellbound by the quiet, commanding presence of Sam Neill as Captain Borodin, standing side by side with his fellow actors, breathing life into a classic story of honor, duty, and the universal human yearning for peace and freedom. It is in these enduring, powerful cinematic moments that the true spirit of an actor resides, safely preserved in the amber of film history, forever immune to the temporary distractions of the digital world, reminding us of the incredible power of storytelling to connect us across generations, languages, and the finality of life itself.